Hello, everyone, and welcome to the iSpring Solutions webinar series, where every week we talk about e-learning trends, share iSpring tips and tricks, and cover clients' cases. My name is Paulina. I'm the community manager at iSpring, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. And as a presenter, I have invited an iSpring user and an iSpringer, Kevin Baker. Hi, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm well, Polina. How are you?
I'm good, very excited for today's webinar because Kevin will be talking about how he was able to achieve exceptional user experience with iSpring. So guys, stay tuned for lots of tips and tricks from your peer. And I also have great news for everybody who for some reason cannot sit through the whole session. It's been recorded. So guys, no worries. You will receive a link to a replay sometime after the webinar. However, I would like to encourage you to stay till the very end because it's a great opportunity to address your questions directly to our presenter. And to do so, please submit them in the question box, which you will find on the right side of the GoToWebinar panel. Okay, I think at this moment we are ready to begin. So Kevin, I'm passing the mic over to you.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. All right. So, thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, my name is Kevin Baker. I am the co-founder of Apex Anesthesia Review. And today I'm going to share with you how I achieved an exceptional experience using iSpring. So let's get started. So what I'd like to talk about primarily is the concepts of user experience and engagement. And we hear these words so often, yet do we truly understand their meaning? So for instance, if I say the word Apple, you probably think you already know what I'm talking about, but do you really? You know, could I be talking about a Granny Smith or a Fuji or a Golden Delicious? Or perhaps I'm talking about the tech giant who makes iPhones, iPads, computers, so on and so forth. Or perhaps I'm talking about Gwyneth Paltrow's daughter. So let's think about user experience and engagement for a minute. What comes to mind? I'd venture to guess that we probably share a lot of similar ideas. However, like when I said the word Apple, these ideas might differ from one person to the next. Now, to complicate matters further, what makes for a good or bad apple? Personally, I find zero deliciousness in a golden delicious apple. And the same can be said for a lot of e-learning that's out there today. There's good variation between what is good and what is not so good. And we're going to dive into in a few minutes some of the metrics that make things perhaps better for our learner as opposed to not. So based on this exercise, we basically discovered a problem. How do we create a delicious user experience while fostering user engagement? So to really say that another way, how do we create impactful courses that produce outcomes we desire while exciting our learners throughout the process? So today what I'd like to do is pull back the curtain and share how we created a wildly successful e-learning business with a strong focus on user experience and engagement using the iSpring tools. So what's in it for you? Whenever I attend a talk or a webinar, if I can walk away with at least one or two actionable ideas, then I feel like I received a sound return on my investment. And my hope for you today is that you will also finish this and feel like you've received a return on your investment as well. So here's a high-level overview of what we're going to cover. So number one, proven strategies and tactics that will surprise and delight your learners. Number two, how we use iSpring to create an amazing customer experience that fosters engagement. Number three, a blueprint to quickly deploy a successful e-learning strategy. And number four, even perhaps for some of you, ignite your entrepreneurial spark. So, the accidental instructional designer. We've seen this phrase probably thousands of times, either in presentations or books or blogs or wherever. And while I don't want to spend too much time on my journey into e-learning and instructional design, I do want to provide enough to give you some background context. So like many of you, I didn't graduate high school and declare that I'm going to be an instructional designer one day. Right. So instead, it actually took me a little bit of time to kind of figure out where I wanted to go in life. And I decided I wanted to impact the world as a nurse anesthetist. As you can imagine, quite a different path than instructional design. So I've practiced anesthesia for well over a decade. And for those of you that don't know, nurse anesthetists are often called the best kept secret in healthcare. We deliver over 65 million anesthetics each year in operating rooms, outpatient surgery centers, pain clinics, and really everywhere else that anesthesia services are provided. So from the very young to the very old, from the healthy to those frankly knocking on death's door, I've really been there and done it all. And while helping patients through their times of need is immensely fulfilling, one of my favorite things about my job when I worked clinically was the ability to teach the graduate and doctoral students that came through to learn anesthesia in the operating room. So fast forward to 2012, where I and another CRNA colleague um, took a leap of faith and decided to create an e-learning company where our primary objective was to help nurse anesthesia graduate students prepare for their national certification exam. Now, after 2 years of many, many late nights and lost weekends, we finally cobbled together a minimum viable product that we could then share with the world. And at the time, we competed against some really established companies that had a tight grip on our very small little niche space. But within only a few short years, we've really emerged as a dominating force in our market. So in fact, the 120 graduate programs in the country, in the United States, over 90 of those schools require their students to use our courses. Now, this is frankly amazing, and it's a tremendous responsibility, and certainly one that we don't take lightly. So creating high quality content is definitely at the top of our priority list. And then as we've grown, we've then scaled to help CRNAs or nurse anesthetists already in practice maintain credits so they can continue to work. So here's a quick picture of me. This is me giving anesthesia on a mission trip in Honduras. And this is a lady, she had, you can see she has a big lump on her neck. She had a huge thyroid tumor that we had to take out. So success, how do we define success? You know, for us, learner outcomes are the most important key performance indicator. And here's just a small sample of the thousands of students who we've impacted over the years. Now, before I get into the actual meat and potatoes of this presentation, I do want to do a quick poll and ask you which product you're currently using to create your e-learning courses.
So right now we have three options, and we would like to ask you guys to really quickly vote for which one you are using. Either it's an iSpring Suite authoring tool, maybe you're using iSpring Learn LMS, maybe you use both. You can check both of them. Maybe you're using something else. If you're using something else and don't mind sharing it with us, please do so in the chat box. We will be happy to learn more about our audience. Let's share the results really quickly. As you can see, 71% uses iSpring Suite, 22% uses iSpring Learn, and 26 are using something else. Okay, so I will hide it right now and pass the mic back to Kevin.
So now that that was pretty interesting to see. So let's talk about how we might select a authoring tool. So really before we commit to any particular tool, you really need to understand the learning curve. And this can kind of be divided into two parts. So number one, what's the bare minimum you need to know to roll out e-learning that is, in air quotes, at least good enough? And number two, how long will it take for you to truly master the tool? So chances are you already know PowerPoint, so frankly, you're halfway there. But do you know PowerPoint well enough in the context of providing high quality content for your learners? And this is where there's a tremendous need for a deep understanding of user experience and engagement. And these things are really a function of how you leverage two things, your tools and of course your creativity. Now, both of these things can be learned. In fact, if you want to improve your e-learning game quickly, there's of course a ton of books, conferences, online courses about online courses, which is kind of meta, coaches, consultants, etc. Now, before we move forward, I do want to go on a quick tangent and say a few things about design. So 3 things here. Number 1, your learner is going to judge the quality of your content based on your design. So you could have the most amazing content imaginable, but if your design is not good, it's really not going to have the same perceived value to your learner. Number 2, the entire point of design is to support your message. So if your design overpowers your message, then you need to either tweak your design, improve your message, or perhaps both things simultaneously. And then finally, I just can't stress enough that less is more. As instructional designers, we often think about cognitive load. And while interactions and animations can be engaging, they are not in and of themselves engagement. So it's really the learner experience as a whole that makes content truly engaging. So sometimes it's more, when you're learning something, it's more important to learn what not to do. And I really try to embody that with this slide. And there are so many things wrong with this slide. And hopefully you guys can pick out at least 5 or 10 of them. But there's a stock dated background, the fonts don't match, the contrast is poor, the font families don't complement each other very well, the body font is too clunky, there's way too many bullet points, too much text, the image is too small, it had this weird animation that didn't really seem to contribute to the overall message. The image is a JPEG with a non-matching background. So, hopefully we can do a lot better than this. So, what is this slide intended to do? What is its primary objective? Well, simply put, this slide is describing an app that we can use in the operating room to help us measure blood loss. So the question is there a better way to show this? And of course there is. So we're going to look at a quick example. And the example I'm going to show you would normally be paired with high quality voiceover, but I've removed that and sped up the sequence just to give you a basic idea of a better way to convey the information presented on the last slide. So you can see simple, clean visuals, simple animations. The only animations that are there are things that actually complement the message. There's nothing extraneous. And you can see that's it. So we'll close that out. So let's get into a lot of examples. Quizzing. I love quizzes. We make a tremendous use of quizzing throughout all of our courses, but I want to challenge you with a question of, are you using quizzes the right way? Obviously, right is again in quotes here. So when we think of quizzes, we tend to think of them as assessing the learner's knowledge following some sort of curriculum. Now, are there other ways that we can leverage the power of quiz questions in our e-learning? Well, of course there are, but you have to know a few things about your learner first. So primarily, what is the baseline level of knowledge that your learners bring to the table before starting your course? And what might be best for one population may not always be best for another. So we definitely don't want to be too dogmatic in our approach. We want to look at everything within the appropriate context. So what I'm going to show you in a few minutes is an example from our student course. And in here, our students have been exposed to the content and the concepts that we teach somewhere else in their graduate curriculum. So for this reason, we can use question-guided learning to help them think about what they've already learned previously and then layer on and add to that as they go through the course. So here's an example of this in action. And this was built with iSpring Quizmaker. And what we have here is a practice question, and this is an example of a matching question. So I'm just going to drag these together. The answer is not going to be correct. And what we've done is we've given the learner a question to get them to queue up what they know about a given topic. We give them feedback directly related to this particular question. And then what we do is then we then follow with a high yield explanation of everything they need to know about the topic addressed by the question. So this particular piece is about a complex set of nerves that emerges from the spinal cord through the neck that allows you to control your arm. And this is built on an info slide in Quizmaker. I'm just going to scroll down. You can see we have a fair amount of images. Again, very, very clean to help the learner. And you're probably looking at this and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all the bullet points and look at all the texts. Well, again, this comes back to being too dogmatic. So there are some learners who just need to learn things on a conceptual level. There are some learners who need to learn every single last detail. And when you have somebody providing anesthesia to you, you want to make sure they know every single detail to keep you safe while they're taking care of you. And then this process for this particular course is very much rinse and repeat. iSpring makes it really easy to incorporate images. Certainly you could do audio here as well. Same sort of thing, immediate feedback followed by the learning content. And again, this flips things upside down, but it works really, really well for our particular learners. So we'll close that one out. So next, one of the downsides of digital learning is that some learners really enjoy a tactile experience as well. And I'm a huge believer in pluralistic learning, which is simply different modalities that teach the same thing. And by approaching things from different angles, learners are better able to build those neural networks in their brain to help them retain and recall the information. So this was also built with the iSpring product. And this is actually a workbook that accompanies our course that the students can print out and complete as they go through the course. They could also have this as a PDF, which they can use an app like GoodNotes or Notability to be able to take notes on their iPad. Here we go. And for us, what we've done, again, we've incorporated the images from the course and just leave them unlabeled or tables that aren't filled in. And that way they're able to actively engage and leverage that hand-to-brain connection that really occurs as we write things down. So branching is one of those things that a lot of people are very interested because it can create a more customized learning experience for your learner. And we can take this pretest concept a bit further by incorporating branches into this. So here's the concept. You could start with an entire quiz or a quiz question, serve that to your learner, and if they fail the quiz or don't answer the question correctly, you can then branch to review content. Clearly, they didn't know the information so they need to review. Then they could go to the next quiz or question and sort of do this over and over. Now, if they happen to get the answer right or pass the quiz, with whichever benchmark you set, they would be able to bypass that content, move to the next quiz, and again, only be served content that is relevant to them. And you can do this over and over and over again. So branching, we can make this simple or we can make this incredibly complex. I'm going to show you an example. There might be some audio on this, so you might hear it. But basically what I'm going to show you is within a slide for learners who want to learn more, we just created a small tab where the learner can click. It shoots out to another page, allows them to select a variety of things to learn on a deeper level if they choose, and then return back to the primary content in the course. So we see over here is this Learn More tab. we can bring that out, and then these are hyperlinks to information, could be elsewhere in your LMS or somewhere on the web or wherever it happens to be hosted. So learners have the option for learning more, but they're not necessarily forced to within the course. Now, you can approach this problem another way, and you can instead insert a web object directly into the course. The beauty of web objects is you can just take an embed code. So let's say you have video from Vimeo or YouTube or wherever. You take the embed code, you insert it into the web object, and all of a sudden, it looks like this content that is hosted elsewhere is in your presentation. Right here is a video from Vimeo. So you can see there's a couple options for giving more content to your learners for those that want it without forcing them to do so. So another thing that we make extensive use of course, are tabs interactions. Show you an example here. Now, iSpring, I believe it was about last year, introduced pre-made tabs interactions, which make your life a whole lot easier because these things are already built for you. This one I built myself within PowerPoint. It uses 5 slides and transparent overlays with hyperlinks to each slide. But here we can see this is an ultrasound image. So if you took an ultrasound device and stuck it on the front of your neck, this is what you would see. For our learners, it's important they understand what they see. So this gives them the opportunity to go back and forth and quiz themselves in the process. Here's another one from a different angle. And the same sort of thing. Then this is actually the 5 different slides. So we'll just scroll through those. All right, so moving onward, thinking outside the box with pre-made interactions. So as I said, iSpring has introduced a bunch of these within the past year. And no doubt these can really be significant time savers. But another question I want to challenge you with is, are there other ways to leverage these in ways for which perhaps they weren't otherwise intended? So I'm going to show you an example of thinking outside the box a little bit. And this is an example of an FAQ interaction. And what we did is we created decks of flashcards for our learners. So it's basically open-ended questions, and then they're able to answer the question themselves and quiz themselves this way. With these, you can incorporate images. So of course, we've done that. But it's just a different way, again, to approach the content. This is really great for mobile. It just, helps people learn on a deeper level. So let's get a little more complex. And let's talk about scenario-based learning with branching. So there's a couple benefits to this. And number one, it gives your learner even more control over his or her learning path. And it gives them the opportunity to learn deeper about a given topic. And you can do this in a number of ways. You can do this with video. You can certainly do this with static slides. You can do this with something like the dialogue simulation that is made available to you in the iSpring suite. So one of the benefits of scenario-based learning is that it gives you the opportunity to expose your learner to a high-stakes situation in a very low-stakes environment. So, in my case, we're teaching how to do a technique or teaching how to treat cardiac arrest in the operating room. Obviously, you want your learners to have the opportunity to kind of go through the thinking and the logic and the muscle memory of this stuff before actually touching a real patient. It also exposes learners to rare events, so events that they may not see out in the wild. And the users can repeat simulations to see what other outcomes might have occurred had they made different choices. So when I was a kid, and perhaps I'm dating myself a little bit, but back in the 80s, we had these choose your own adventure books. And in fact, this one looks a little bit older than that. But as opposed to a linear presentation, these books would allow you to get to a certain page and then make a decision. And then that would take you down a certain path, and then you'd make another decision. And that would take you down a certain path, and then you'd have to make another decision. So your choices influenced the end of the story. So we can do this with iSpring, and I'll show you an example. And if you'll recall, in the beginning, I showed you a lady who had a big tumor in her neck. And that could really complicate our ability to put a breathing tube in somebody so we can breathe for them during surgery. So this is a simulation-based interaction that kind of takes learners through how to think through that type of experience. So I'll just go through this quickly with you. And in the beginning, we just have a little information about the patient, current situation, their background, and then of course the recommendation. And in this case, this patient requires emergent airway management because the patient happens to have a very difficult time breathing. So we'll come back to our main page. And also in this interaction, we are teaching how to use an algorithm, and this happens to be an algorithm that helps people work their way through difficult situations involving airway management. So then we can click on that, and then we can take the learner to that algorithm. Of course, they can print it or have it open in a separate window to refer to as they move along. Then, of course, we can go back and start patient care. And you can also see we have this character over here, and this is, again, a part of a character pack from iSpring Suite. And what you're going to see is that her emotions change based on the decisions that I make. So if I make good decisions, she's going to become happier. If I make not so good decisions, she's not going to be quite as happy. So we're going to give this patient some oxygen. She seems happy about that. I suspect the patient is as well. Now, again, we can see this patient has difficult airways, so we're going to call for the equipment that we need to be able to treat this patient. So we're going to call for the difficult airway card. Again, she's happy. Now it says, okay, how do you want to manage this airway? So what techniques do you want to use? And what I did here is I picked a technique that may not be the right one, but let's say in this particular instance, I don't want to take a learner down the path. So I can say, look, that wasn't the best one. Here's why. Let's go back to the main path, which we're going to do. And then we're going to pick the correct answer. Oh, and she's not very happy. So, and I misspoke there. So you can see here, this was a bad choice. But what's different here is that this scenario is going to make me deal with the consequence of my decision. So I'm here, the patient's oxygen level is dropping quickly. So I need to call for help. So that's what I'm going to do. And while help's coming, I'm still having issues. You can see she's really not happy with me. What do I want to do next? And this is basically the last slide. And depending on my choice, the patient either lives or does not live. Well, I'm feeling generous today, so we're going to make sure the patient survives the experience. And you can see she's happy. And then some feedback information if you wanted. And then if the learner wanted, they could restart the information, restart the simulation, and then be able to say, okay, well, if I made a different choice here, what might the outcome have been? And we found that for our learners, this is really, really impactful. So one of the hot topics in instructional design involves using story. And it's not that we have to create fanciful stories akin to Game of Thrones or the literary classics, Really, instead, all we need to do is incorporate the basic elements of good story to draw our learner into the content. And by creating a real life scenario, like we just saw, we can immerse the learner into the content. So a great way to really look at into this is to look at the field of marketing, right? So marketers need to convince their prospects that whatever it is they're selling provides value in their customers' lives. And as instructional designers, we really need to communicate the value to your learners in order to compel them to learn from your courses. So I'm going to show you, this is a story framework. This is based on a book from Don Miller called Building a Story Brand, which is focused on marketing, but it really helps understand the elements of story. But I'm going to give you the synopsis here. There's going to be 7 elements. So number 1, there's a character. And in this case, the learner is the hero. So the learner is the character in the story. Again, the anesthesia provider. And this other character has a problem. We saw that the patient had difficulty breathing. And this learner meets a guide. And this could be Yoda in Star Wars, but in our case, it's the difficult airway algorithm. And this guide has a plan. And in our case, this plan is the treatment plan that we use to take our patient on safe passage. And our character, our hero, has to have some sort of call to action, right? So in this case, we know the patient is not going to live if they're not treated quickly and effectively. This guide then helps them avoid failure. Our algorithm tells the provider what to do. And then hopefully it ends in success. And in this case, our patient lived. As I said, there are choices we could have made where the patient could have passed away. So now that we've gone through some examples, there are a lot of ways that we can get our content to our learners. So there's a lot of ways we can kind of skin that proverbial cat. And I want to show you 2 ways that can help you quickly integrate the content you've created in iSpring into your e-learning stack. So number 1 is a do-it-yourself approach. So here's just one of many examples, but if you had your authoring tool like iSpring Suite, you would then host that somewhere, either on a server of yours or in the cloud with Dropbox or a variety of other solutions. Then you would have your website, could use WordPress, and use a LMS plugin into WordPress, for example, LearnDash, but there's a variety of other options out there as well. And then you would have to integrate with some sort of learning record store or an LRS. And again, there's lots of options. There's GrassBlade is one example, but again, there's several. And you could say, well, maybe that's too much. Maybe I don't have the tech background, or I don't want to deal with what it is to develop all of that and certainly maintain it. You want a prepackaged solution. Certainly iSpring Learn would fit the bill for that. In our use case, we actually do both. So we have about 1,200 learners on iSpring Learn. And then we also have, any given time, probably between 5,000 and 7,000 active learners in our courses. In total, we're somewhere over 10,000, probably approaching 15,000 learners trained in total. So another question is, can you use iSpring on a Mac? And the answer is absolutely you can. I do. But to do it, you do have to go through a couple steps. And you have to use some sort of virtualization software for Windows, and that could be VMware Fusion or Basecamp or Parallels. But once you have that set up, iSpring works flawlessly. And of course, at the very end, I do want to give a nod to iSpring support. The best tool in the world is not worth its salt if the company that's created that product doesn't stand behind it, and if they don't work to support their users. Having used iSpring for over 5 years, I can honestly say their support has been second to none and has definitely been pivotal to our success. So to wrap things up, where we've been, what makes for good and bad e-learning design, versatility of quizzing, the concept of pre-testing and different ways to leverage quizzing into your e-learning content, branching, everything from simple to complex case-based scenarios, engagement through story, of course, simulation, and finally, a blueprint to rapidly deploy your e-learning plan. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time. If you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer to the best that I can.